Hey, Pop of the Morning, everyone. This is your co-host, Phil. With me, as always, is...
Your co-host, Tom. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. This is the show, of course, where we take a look at the pop culture of our youths. The pop culture that we imbibed, that we sipped in, that we drank in at young ages, and we ask ourselves, how did the ideas that informed this pop culture, how did the themes, how did these things land like alien invaders and take root, colonize our brains, extract the resources, and leave them nothing but a dried up husk? That's the question we're after each and every week. And this week we're looking at a movie where that plot line literally happens to the earth. We're looking at 1996's Independence Day.
Yeah. Let freedom
ring.
ID4. ID4. When I went to watch this, I brought it up on Amazon Prime, and I typed in, like, independent, you just do partial, and it brings up the list.
Yeah.
And I selected it, and I was like, the image looks familiar, but it says ID4. What is, like,
Is that the right? Yeah.
I'm still confused by that title. I don't know what it is. Such a strange thing, I guess, because it's the 4th of July, Independence Day 4. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this movie. It's because it's ripe with, like, so much weirdness and so dumb. It's such a dumb Hollywood film, like a blockbuster film.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was entertained enough to sit through it relatively well, I guess. I mean, it's no Mars Attacks, except it is exactly Mars Attacks. So I was thinking of that entire time I was watching that. I was like, I really like this when I saw it as Mars Attacks. Yeah. I don't know.
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it when they did this as Mars Attacks. We did an episode of this show in the first season. If you're a long time listener to this podcast, you know that we did cover Mars Attacks, and it's not that we rate movies thumbs up or thumbs down or anything. We try really hard to be a little more nuanced than that. But yeah, I gotta say, Mars Attacks is a movie I love, and it's playing with some of the same basic toys, right?
Yeah.
It's got the same basic ray gun blaster, satellites, Martian invasion, destruction of famous world landmarks. There's superficially a lot that are similar about these two movies. But whereas Mars Attacks, directed by Tim Burton, based on a trading card set from the 1960s, is willfully kitschy. It's sort of dark and cynical. This is a movie that actually is, in a certain light, a certain way, super earnest, super idealistic, and it's super straightforward in what it's trying to do, right? And namely, right, I think it comes straight from that title, ID4. I don't know about that, but Independence Day. I was thinking really hard about it because as I was watching this movie, I was also really confused. I think that on one level, that's just hanging on the fact that this is a summer movie. It's a summer blockbuster, and they're trying to hang it on that holiday weekend opening to get people's movie dollars. It's like the movie tie and the marketing that writes itself, man. You just tell people the opening day right there in the title. But also there's that famous speech, which is probably one of the most quotable quote unquote moments in this movie. It's sort of one of the more memorable moments where Bill Pullman, one of the Bills from the 90s, between Bill Paxton, Bill Pullman, these kind of generic middle-aged white guy Bills, who's playing President Thomas J. Whitmore. He says, "The 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today we celebrate our Independence Day." And it's like the emotional pivot point of the movie. And, again, I don't really think, it's Independence Day is celebrating independence from a colonial master. And I guess that's kind of what the aliens are trying to do. Though it feels more like an invasion or an attack. Yeah. It just seems the name is such a weird thing. but it speaks to the core of what this movie is about.
Yeah.
And this movie is presenting a vision of world politics coming out just 5 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, in which the United States is the leader of not just the free world, but the world.
Yeah.
You've got this scene in the movie where like the Americans finally crack the code of like how to bring down the shield, right? To bring down that shield, Jeff Goldblum figures out what that looks like. And so then they pass the word in old-time Morse code, I believe is the movie calls it, around the world. And you've got these scenes of, like, British, Iraqis, Russians, and they're all, and the Japanese, all of America's, like, former rivals going, oh, the Americans have a plan. Well, it's a bloody time. What do the Americans want us to do? It's all of these countries have just been sitting here waiting for America to do something, to come up with a plan. They've all just been sitting there twiddling their thumbs, apparently, saying, well, what's America going to do? And so it is at its core, it's maybe the most blindly, overly optimistic, patriotic movie that we have watched in the long run of this show. We've covered movies like Red Dawn, Air Force One, on the last episode of this show, all of which are very pro-American. But I think this movie, it takes the cake. It is the most pro-American piece of propaganda, the most celebratory, triumphal, laudatory piece of American propaganda that we've ever looked at.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not like the pro-America like Red Dawn where it's like this is our place, so like we're fighting against our fellow man who's communist and taking over, or Air Force One, where it's like, again, communists or whatever, we're fighting against somebody else. Yeah. This is like America is the best because of our ideas, our American ideals spreading across the world. Like, they're just inherently better. Yeah. And so once we have a common enemy, then the world can realize how great America is and how everyone should fall in line. Yeah. Like, it's not even a question. There's no debate, no fighting, no infighting. Yeah. It's easy. Just do it.
The champions of the human race. Yeah, it's the obvious champions.
This movie had so much going on about it. It was like a commentary on like you said, like it was an invasion, but it felt like colonialism and like like an empire coming along, and like they were locusts. They come and like take other people's shit, and it was like, okay, well, I feel like we've had that in our own history in America and everywhere.
You mean Americans, humans, empires,
empires,
the Industrial Revolution. Yeah.
I mean, Bill Pullman does say that it's an Independence Day from annihilation and not like oppression or anything like that. Like he kind of pushes aside not tyranny or oppression. It's Independence Day from annihilation, guys. That's what we're fighting for. It's always part of the
We're
speech.
claiming our independence from death.
Yeah, and they're
really bending over backwards to make that title work.
Yeah, and so there was that. So there's this like kind of commentary on like, this is bad, but we no longer do this. We're much better. This is the 90s. We're beyond that. And then there's also this weird level I noticed as I was watching. There's this weird level of like meritocracy. Like, only the people who have access to like higher authorities or being saved are people who have done something of value or perceived as value in the eyes of the United States government. Yeah. It's very strange. Did you notice that? That was super weird.
I'm glad you brought that up, because as I was watching this movie, I was noticing that really quickly too. This movie, there is a very clear hierarchy, and this is a very male-centered movie. I guess that makes sense. The demographic here is young men. But let's look at for a second the way that this movie treats its male characters. Set aside the females for a minute. We can come back around to that, because there's plenty to say there too.
Yeah.
But the movie's general tone, right? There's we can list it out. The casual mockery of the scientist, that is Jeff Goldblum. His father, the tough talking Jewish stereotype kind of guy, right? He says 8 years in school and you're a joke, right? Like, he's very dismissive. His ex-wife is also dismissive of him for similar reasons, talking about how he never has done anything with his life. You ride your bike to work, right? Like that's just a joke that writes itself. There's Randy Quaid, right, who is the alien abductee, you know, and there the suggestion obviously is he's a, not so much that he's a kook for believing he was abducted by aliens, but it's the thing that happened to him. Mm-hmm. They suggest that he was sexually probed or violated by the aliens that abducted him, and they say this to the TV interviewers. People in the diner say it. Again, the rape of a man in this movie, the rape of a man is a punchline that writes itself. You don't have to explain why that makes him a joke. Oh, that's why he's so goofy. He's not a real man. He's been violated or dropped in the hierarchy. You've got Harvey Fierstein vetching to his shrink and just being on his cell phone and being ineffectual as the world ends. There's disdain for Brent Spiner, who's the long-haired scientist in the basement at Area 51. He's talking about all the work they've been doing for 50 years since Roswell, and they keep cutting him off and saying, "Can you tell us anything useful?" Right? Like, guy barely can finish a sentence. He's been talking for 30 seconds, and they want to know, what can you tell me that's useful? These are all the laugh lines and the jokes of the movie, right? So the broad hierarchy here, right? Those are the people who are the men who are not worthy of our respect or regard. They don't get it from the characters. They don't get it from the president. They don't get it from the women in the movie. Mm-hmm. The president, right? He's falling in the polls. They keep talking about how his presidency is adrift, how he was so much more loved when he was a pilot and a war hero, and now he's just a president who doesn't know what he's doing. He's impotent. But when he finally gets it back in the cockpit at the end of the movie and he's flying that mission, right? Yeah. He's suddenly redeemed because he can fly and kill. Randy Quaid is the same thing. He stops being a joke as soon as he gets in that plane and he's ready to kill something. When he figures out how to get his revenge for the violation that the aliens wrought against him, that's suddenly when he's a hero again in the final minutes of the movie. He can reclaim his masculinity through violence. Jeff Goldblum, the same thing, right? He's only regarded as useful when he figures out how to weaponize his knowledge. Yeah. And then he gets in there with the only real man in the whole movie from start to finish, Will Smith. Who notices his profession is warrior, and there's never a question of his virility. He's dating a stripper, right? He is we see him first with his shirt off in bed. It's clear what they've been doing the night before. He's the only character in here whose masculinity is never questioned, and it's because he's a professional soldier. But that's Jeff Goldblum's path to redemption. When he smokes that cigar with Will Smith, he's invited back into the boys' club. Yeah, right. It's a movie. It's a movie that thinks talking and nuance and thinking and expertise. All those things are a little iffy, a little questionable. Certainly worthy of jokes and ridicule. Swagger's what we want. It's the highest, it's like the highest form of masculinity. Unearned confidence, killing things, hitting things, putting things down. It's the highest expression of manhood. And the loudest, most aggressive trash talkers, like Will Smith, right, are clearly what the camera loves in this movie.
Hell yeah.
Is that a fair... Is that a fair summary? I'm sorry to go on that riff, man, but
no, yeah.
Like, I'm just watching that. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Be a little more aggressive. Say, look at me, just a little more aggressively, right? Right? Like that is really what this movie is all about. It's about peacocks.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw this term. I really wish I'd looked it up the other day because I saw it like in a I can't remember where I saw it. Like it was on TikTok or Twitter or Instagram. But I think Bell Hooks was the person who brought it up, but it was like patriarchal porn. It was this idea.
That's this.
And as I was watching this, I was like, oh yeah, that term I just learned about, patriarchal porn. Yeah, this is like 100% like masculinity turned up to 11, and this is what masculinity, walk softly, carry a big stick type of thing going on here. We
except they stomp loudly and carry a big stick and use it.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Yeah, like the God, what's the guy's name? The guy who's abducted. What was his name?
It was Randy Quaid. I don't remember the character's name. Let's see.
That's fine. Russell Cass.
Yeah.
Randy Quaid. Yeah. He's like, it's not just that he's a little weird. He's a straight up alcoholic. Like, he's drowning his post traumatic stress. He's self medicating strongly.
Right.
With that, and his redeeming moment is suicide mission. Because he runs out. He runs.
You finally found something valuable to do with all those emotions, buddy.
He's impotent. Can't shoot off his plane is impotent and can't shoot off his missile. So
it's nuclear load.
So he's going to jam his plane up the collective asses of these aliens. It opens like a giant sphincter, ready to take a shit on humanity, and he's like, "I'm back.
There's my moment.
There's my moment." And everyone's like, "Hell yeah, let's spread the word. This is how it's done." And then there's those fucking cigars that everybody has. The pilots have
all the time,
and they have to have them so they can celebrate.
Yeah,
but cigars are like I don't know, pretty established phallic symbol, I feel like, for a lot of people. And so, like, once these manly men are done, what's the manliest thing they can do is they can like suck their own dicks and smoke their own dicks. Yeah. We're the best. This is what we're doing. Man. And so it's such an insane film, and so wild to see this representation on here.
Yeah.
And the thing that gets me is, like, I weirdly, God, what was the moment? I was weirdly like feeling good about. Oh, the moment when Randy Quaid was like flying, and like everyone was like, it's like keep him off my tail, and they were like, all right, guys, let's give him some room. And that cooperation that was happening, that coordination between the men, that was for me the most inspired moment. That was the most That was like, oh, these people are working together collectively, and the president is like willing to like back down and get all this, like, make room for this guy to. And I was like, this is the best part of the movie for me.
It's because they could smell his testosterone. They could smell it in the air. And Phil, you are a well-documented beta male. suddenly, you could relate.
I know.
You knew where you fit into the pack.
I have oat milk in my.
Like, hey, that's where I'd be.
I have oat milk. In my coffee. I can't even handle the good stuff.
Bring it up the rear. That'd be me. Yeah, no, it's.
Yeah, it's.
No, and that's Phil. I think that's a really astute. You bring in again so many other levels of that here, right? Like it is, I love that patriarchal porn, or was that what you called it? Patriarchal porn or porn patriarchy, whatever.
Yeah.
It is dripping in this movie. Again, you have. I think this is Will Smith's first big blockbuster, his first big movie, and there's a big deal if you read about the behind the scenes.
Yeah,
apparently the studio was not comfortable casting Will Smith in this movie. The conventional wisdom being that in foreign markets, quote, foreign markets are not ready to accept a black man in this role. And I believe that people would say that. We have, in the course of producing this show, looked at so many movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And they're just, not only are there not black people in leading roles in so many of the movies, there just are not any people of color at all.
Yeah.
Period. At all, right? And so I do believe that. But I got to say, right, this role that Will Smith is cast into, it is sort of the beginning of his archetype, right? So there's like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Will Smith that is like this underdog, and so some of his like cheekiness there, some of his snappy sitcom type dialogue is understandable.
Yeah.
But that's sort of translated here into this guy who's portrayed at basically being good at everything. It's a cockiness. Mm-hmm. And that becomes like the Will Smith brand that gets its start right in this movie. I think it's the most pure form of it. There's this exchange he has with his girlfriend, right, where she says, "There you go, thinking you're all that, but you're not as charming as you think you are, sir." And he shoots back, "Yes, I am."
But
that's his whole bantery dialogue, and
no, go ahead.
It's the whole kind of thing, and I gotta say, maybe this is just me, but I do find that it's this sort of like alpha thing, right? There's the part where he's dragging the corpse of the alien through the salt flats, and he's just so angry, and he's talking about how I was supposed to have the weekend off, and now I'm dragging your ass through the desert, and then he stops and starts kicking it for no reason, and it's just this like raging testosterone that's coming off of him in this movie, right? And again, he's clearly supposed to be like kind of like the main central character of this movie. He's supposed to be the guy that this is sort of built around in terms of like audience identification, or maybe audience aspiration is the thing.
Yeah.
And I guess again, it's ground zero for this sort of brand of Will Smith is I think maybe the leading light in this, but this brand of leading man that is in a lot of ways flawless.
Right.
If he has any flaw, it's that the world is not giving him enough of a chance.
Right.
And it was this kind of archetype that became really popular right around the time of this movie, and I think continues on to this day, where like what passes for characterization is like a frustration with the system from a man who seems to think he's better than all of it, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Like he's frustrated.
Yeah.
He's frustrated. He steals a helicopter at one point. He just is doing what he wants left and right.
Well, I think he's
in this movie, and he's cocky and disrespectful to everyone while doing it. Yeah. And again, I don't find that to be a particularly compelling character. Well, I find it actually kind of unlikable.
Yeah, well, I think he's like the next step in the Han Solo style character. Like we talked about Harrison Ford in our more recent episode, as him being a president.
Air Force
and he
One.
has this.
If you haven't heard it, go back to the most recent episode.
And he has, Harrison Ford brings this charm and ability to get away with things that no one else can get away with, like whether he's Han Solo or Indiana Jones or the President of the United States. And I feel like Will Smith is that next step of like Harrison Ford's character. He's kind of doing the same thing. It's like it's like you're not as charming as you think you are. He's like, yes, I am. That's the I love you. He's like, it's a very similar feeling to that. I mean,
but I like that connection. That's a nice connection that you make, right? I never made that connection before, but I think the distinction, right, is like I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
But whereas Han Solo and Indiana Jones are always improvising, and they don't know it's going to work out.
Yeah.
I feel like the difference here is that there isn't just not that tension.
Yeah.
In the Will Smith character in this movie,
even flying through the Grand Canyon or wherever he was flying through that canyon.
Yeah, they somehow went from like, I don't understand the geography of this movie.
Grand Canyon to the Salt Flats. But it was like he was just like, try this out, and it's like, and he like bailed, and the plane like, the alien crafts crash and stuff like that, and he was just like, that's right, that's what I'm talking about, and so he didn't have that moment of just like, this isn't going to work, this isn't. It's like I'm a little nervous about this, or like, let's give it a shot. Like he just like went for it, and it was
Indiana Jones. Yeah, Indiana Jones is always having those moments of oh crap, where his eyes get big and he realizes, oh my god, like I just bit off more than I can chew, or he's like, oh, and you'll hear him like improvise some kind of cheesy excuse to try to bluff his way through the Nazis. Will Smith has none of those moments.
Yeah, none of those moments.
He just walks into the helicopter. A guy points a gun at him and says, "Stop! You can't steal that." He goes, "No, I need to," and then just flies away.
Yeah.
He is just so pure alpha,
and I think it's because like you get like when you get Star Wars and Indiana Jones, these are not necessarily big blockbuster films when they originally were kind of like Star Wars. No one was sure what was going to happen. It became like a blockbuster franchise,
right?
And I think the same with Indiana Jones. But Independence Day, from what I've been seeing, was like marketed and set up as a big blockbuster. So they had to like bring that to
engineered from the ground up.
So they had to bring that to the characters. So they were like, oh, let's bring this like idealized man and bring it up to the level of like blockbuster already. And you know, blockbuster along with what's the Tornado? Is it called Tornado?
Twister.
The film. Those ushered in like mid-90s disaster blockbuster films.
Yeah. No, you're right. This is the maturation of the blockbuster, right? Blockbusters, of course, have their roots much earlier than this. You could argue that the antecedents for these things exist in like the 50s with something like the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
But really, people point to things like Jaws in the 1970s as being the beginning of this blockbuster phenomenon, this like summer tentpole movie. But that form does not truly mature until the 1990s. And that's when you start seeing like indie movies or just weirder, more offbeat movies, you know, getting cast aside for movies that are designed to sort of hit like these 4-quadrant movies that like that mom and dad and the kids can all find some piece of, right?
Yeah.
So that you can sell tickets to every member of the family, right? We want them all to be PG, maybe PG-13. We want them to land right in the summer when everyone's off school. We want them to have action, romance, young guy, old guy, young woman. Like you want the whole thing packaged in it, plus special effects. And you're right. This thing is engineered from the ground up to be that kind of movie. I think it does touch off this era of movies that, in a lot of ways, we're still in the midst. That's absolutely the Marvel. Marvel. The basic blueprint of Marvel movies as well. We're still living in this era. Marvel foregrounds the serialized aspect of their movies a lot more. I think that's Marvel's big innovation.
Yeah.
But they're still running on this Independence Day kind of infrastructure.
There's never going to be a film all about the Avengers taking on the Wrecking Crew. Because the Wrecking Crew is small potatoes at this point. they've dealt with the biggest.
They've upped the ante so high.
Yeah. The next one after Thanos,
everything's turned up to 11.
Galactus or Eternity or something like that. I don't know. It's like
Jesus. It's going to be Jesus.
Yeah. It's interesting how this is. How that's done that with all the characters in this Americanized version of like. Bringing the blockbuster. I mean, it's like the American America is a blockbuster in itself. It's a blockbuster country.
This movie made more money abroad than it did at home, and I think it's one of the first big blockbusters to do that.
Yeah.
It made about $300 million in the domestic box office, but about $500 million abroad. And this is the 1990s, where movies are just starting to come out in China. I don't think this one did. But it's a time where, like, you know, again, the Iron Curtain has fallen, where this idea of America exporting its films is becoming increasingly important. And so it's.
I mean, this is a perfect propaganda film.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, we've talked about in the 90s Godzilla about, you know, the influence of the military in films. Like, once you involve the military, they get like they get to look at the script and get to write off like what the military does, and that's probably why Will Smith's character is the best of the best. He's a military man.
Yeah.
And so he gets the best lines, the best attributes, everything.
Yeah.
And I think you see that where the U.S. military is like, they don't make the wrong decisions. It's the CIA guy who's the sniveling, who's almost the human villain. He makes the wrong decisions, while the general kind of like, he's there. He's a prominent actor. I don't remember the guy's name, but he's there and he's like advising the president
in the background. He's always smugly smiling in the background.
Yeah, he's letting the CIA and the president make the decision, and then he's carrying them forward. But he's not. His hands are clean with all the bad decisions. Really,
any miscalculation, anything that results in an American losing their lives or a city being destroyed, his hands are not on that, right?
Yeah.
And his sort of posture is quietly, patiently waiting as the president exhausts all these options, diplomacy, the CIA, all these things, right? Until finally the president turns around, comes back around to the one who's always been there for you, the one who's going to greet you with opening arms, the one who's always right, the one who's safe. It's the military. And that general, he embodies that. He's just patiently waiting for the president to recognize that there's only one path forward. And it falls right in line with that sort of like obsession with masculinity that this movie puts on display. You know, another manifestation, as we said, that construct of masculinity, the conception of masculinity that is portrayed in this movie, is wrapped up in a man's ability to fight. None of these men are worthwhile until they get in that cockpit, until they're carrying a gun. And you know, we look at movies like Air Force One, which are equally obsessed with American militarism, American military prowess, at the amazing things that. You know, in here as we record this in the year 2022, the military does accounting in a number of ways, but it's safe to say that we spend close to $1 trillion a year on the military. Approximately 1/3 of our budget every year is spent on the military in this country. That's more than the next 10 countries combined, most of whom are our allies. And this movie is the advertisement. It is the justification for that in front of the American people. Let's face it, most Americans are not watching much CNN. They also wouldn't get much critical analysis of the military or critical questioning of the military if they did. The American media is complicit in this as well. But the big commercial for that $1 trillion price tag, the thing that sells that to the American people is movies like this, where they think, oh God, I'm glad if there ever was an alien invasion, the American military is there. I'm glad if the Russians ever step out of line, we got this, right? We got this in perfect shield. We got the smartest men. We've got the most fancy weapons. It's 100% a big ball of wax that is just picking up every little bit of American militaristic fantasy, blending it with the reality to the point where you know. Last week when we were looking at the movie Air Force One, the top Google question for that movie, right? You know, Google gives you suggested questions to complete your search. The top question for that is Air Force One a real? Is it a real story? Is Air Force One movie real? Is the actual text of that question? People are out here Googling that question so often that they think a movie like Air Force One is based on a true story. It's borderline documentary. And this movie, while it involves aliens, you know, it does mean that every November, every 4 years, we've got a certain percentage of Americans looking at the lineup of presidential candidates and saying, you think that guy could kick an alien's ass? I mean... You wonder why we don't have a female president. The reasons are more complicated than that. But one reason is, well, I'm not sure she could kick an alien's ass. You wonder why a certain percentage of Americans look at Joe Biden and say, you know, pardon my language, what a pussy, right? Part of that is they can't imagine that guy kicking an alien's ass. But a man like Donald Trump gets up and says, you know, punch him in the face, haul him out on a stretcher. Oh, there's a guy who I could imagine kicking an alien's ass. Okay. That fits my Hollywood conception of, like, what the commander-in-chief is supposed to do. He's supposed to be able to kick someone's ass. Yeah, exactly. And I know there's people out there who'd be like, that's... all of that's ridiculous. And a movie... I mean, this is the whole show, but, like, a movie cannot influence, you know, U.S. politics in that way. But it always reminds me of... There's one time I was walking to my car from the grocery store, and I was walking past this... cop and this young woman, and I think I was parked like a car next to her, a car or two down the line, and somebody had hit her car, and she goes, "Can't you take a scraping of the paint and like run analysis or something on that so you could find who did this?" And the cop's like, "Find the perp." Yeah, cop's like, "No, that's TV show, that's CSI. I can't." We don't really have that kind of stuff. But there is, it's well documented, this like
This idea, like what people watch CSI and they look and they go, that's what the facilities are like for police. They have this super high tech ability, and there's only like, you know, we have like 5 or 10 people working on one crime at a time to solve
all the time because it's what God wants. It's justice.
Yeah. So to imagine that this is not influential, that Independence Day where there's aliens, you know, coming down to Earth to annihilate us, and they're beaten by there was only 15% of the U.S. military left by that point, plus the other military, however much was around the world.
Still a walk in the park, right? It's still a walk in the park for them.
Easy, easy peasy. All it took was 2 guys sneaking onto the alien plane and uploading via Macintosh of all computers.
Which somehow is compatible with the alien operating system. Yeah. I can't move files between my wife's Mac and my PC.
I know.
with a thumb drive, but somehow their Mac.
I know Mac.
They could even make the little Union Jack Jolly Roger, the little Jolly Roger appear on the alien screens.
I know Macs were open source at some point, but I don't know when they started really closing the walls.
I mean, this is pure product placement.
But 100%.
It's pure product placement at this point.
And I know they had that craft from like the 50s, but I don't know with it. Maybe that's long enough to hack into the system, even though none of the power was turned on until the people showed up. So now I'm like, it's even more
wireless energy. I mean, you know, the key point though, right? Like, do people really think aliens are going to come down sometime in the next 4 years? Maybe not consciously, right? But it shapes our notion of what we think, what we come to expect, what we think is acceptable, what we think is desirable.
That's why we have to treat invaders
in terms of leadership traits, right? it's you know. And is it a movie that creates these things? It's absolutely playing on established ideas in the American conscious, the American subconscious, right? Let's be honest about that, right? It's wish fulfillment, which is exactly what Will Smith is. He's this idea of this perfect man who never makes a mistake. And again, the biggest problem in his life is people don't see how awesome he is. That's really the only thing he has to surmount, right? And that's how all of us, you know, wish we were. We wish that the world would just conform to us, would just recognize our awesomeness, our greatness. You know, I have no work to do on myself. It's the world that has the work to do, right? And so he is kind of like this I don't know, distillation of like the American man, right? We're all free to be individuals, but all of the rest of you are idiots. I'm the only one who's got it figured out. You should just be more like me. It's a very American attitude. And it's the same thing in terms of the presidency, in terms of the military. I love that anecdote you bring up about the lady asking the cop to do a paint analysis on the car, as if, again, they just have on file all of the paint on every car, and in every car, it's not as if it came out of some gigantic batch in the assembly line, right? It's unique to each individual car, like every snowflake is unique, every paint is unique, and you got to track it down. These things are feedback loops, is what I'm trying to say, right? They are drawing upon things that exist in America. To those who doubt that a movie like this shapes popular ideas, they're drawing upon existing ideas that are floating around there in the ether, but they're making them concrete. They're making them visual in ways that then serve as the springboard for the next thing. I mentioned a bit ago that we're still living in the era of the Independence Day style blockbuster that is just this over-the-top, story is secondary, racing adrenaline, racing testosterone, racing special effects. We're living in that era. And so the question then becomes, how do you top it? How do you make it bigger? How do you make it flashier? How do you make it more aggro, more manly? Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton, whoever the hell that president is, right? He is rated consistently on internet lists of greatest fictional presidents, right alongside Harrison Ford. This is what Americans say they're looking for. And on top of that, right, coming back around to some of these earlier points, let's bring this into like what that means in terms of like real world implications. The theme here about science is that it is a joke, that it's an object of ridicule, that it's sort of pathetic, unless it can do what for us, Phil? Were you paying attention? When is science good? Kill. Unless it can make the military better, then we're suddenly interested in it. Then suddenly we'll give you 5 minutes with the president if you think you know how to kill something. Like Jeff Goldblum, it's not really clear what he's been doing, what kind of science he's working on. It's like SETI, it's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and stuff like that. But like,
no, he worked at a cable
station.
It's a
punchline.
Goldblum worked at a cable station.
And how did he? I missed that jump of logic. I took the wrong off ramp.
8 years with MIT, and decided to work at a cable station. And
that's what his dad was ridiculing.
Yeah, and his wife was, and but he had the intelligence to like find the source code and then realize it was a countdown when he put the pieces together. And so then he talked to his wife, who was in the president. She was like the communication advisor or some shit in the presidency.
Yeah.
But actually I liked Jeff Goldblum's character, until he got into space, really, because he had a set. He was like, I'm smart enough to run this cable station with ease. I go up to the roof and chill out, and then I come down to check on stuff. I'm watering my plants while they tell me stuff, and then I just like, try to figure some stuff out. And then he's like, I got it easy, and then I ride my bike to work, right at home.
Well, right, here's a guy who, in a certain way, is like bowing out of like the traditional criteria for success. He's a man who I wouldn't say necessarily is happy. He certainly has some level of regret, but he's content.
Yeah.
And the message he keeps getting from all of these hyper-driven people is that you're wasting your life.
Yeah.
Right? And again, how does he redeem himself? He gets on board that ship with Will Smith and becomes a real man. He learns how to play with the big boys.
Yeah.
I think this movie, it's everything you need to know about this movie's attitude toward, well, life is I think encapsulated in what seems like a throwaway line. Judd Hirsch, who I do enjoy. I enjoy his presence as Jeff Goldblum's dad.
Yeah.
He's sort of rambling, and at one point he says, "All you need is love." John Lennon, smart man, shot in the back, very sad. Right, that's the line. And it's this summary, this epitaph for John Lennon that just sort of says everything this movie has to say about men and worthwhileness, right? Too bad he wasn't an aggro trash talker.
Yeah.
Too bad he wasn't spitting rhymes with Biggie and Tupac, right? Talking about gunning people down, right? Instead, right, all you need is love. Look what it got you, shot in the back like a worm, right? It just, that line in there, it just jumped right out at me, and it was so jarring. Why is that in here, and why are we summarizing him as again, this juxtaposition? All you need is love. What a joke! What a ridiculous way to lead your life. All you need is love. What does that get you? Shot by someone who's willing to live life and willing to use the tools at their hand. It's just such a casual dismissal of John Lennon. Right?
Yeah.
This movie, Phil, has, I think, a really big... It's sometimes we watch movies on this show and we talk about their cult following. Harold and Maude, for example. Chasing Amy, Rushmore. These are movies we've covered recently on the show that I would say have cult followings.
Yeah.
A certain select group of people who often come across this movie not in theaters, because those movies are usually poorly marketed.
Yeah.
They come across these movies, at some later point in their life. This movie is not a cult movie. This is a movie that has a lot of love among people of our generation. I read a number of posts online, full-blown articles, people talking about how they went to go see this when they were 6 or something like that, and how it's a movie that's changed their life. It's the movie they keep coming back to. It's the movie that for them stands head and shoulders. No, they were talking about how it stands head and shoulders above other movies like Twister or other 90s movies that they saw. This is the one that has the most heart, that brings a smile to your face, that just makes you feel good about yourself. And I've been meditating on that, maybe more than the movie itself, thinking about, there's probably people listening to this show, if they haven't turned it off by now, who feel the same way about this movie. And I'm just, I guess, as a fellow beta male, trying to make sense of that sentiment. This is a movie about the near extinction of the human race, and I guess, you could cast it in a different light and say, well, it's about perseverance, it's about transcending impossible odds. That's also a very American idea. We cast ourselves as the underdog. Mm-hmm. Though, as we've talked about, I find that more charming when it's actually an underdog and not clearly somebody who has his life made for him. But the idea of smiling to this movie and finding it to be like inspirational and uplifting, I find that a confusing idea. I don't know if you have anything to say about that or any kind of response to that. It's a movie that people our age really love. Not enough to like get excited about a sequel.
Yeah.
Which I hear came out at some point.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No.
But what is it about this movie that people love?
I'm sure it probably because they watched it at 7. I mean, it's one of those films that if you probably watched it at a super young age, and you love, it's probably one of the first sci-fi films that you picked up at that age in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it's probably where that love comes from. But I have a hard time wrapping my head around like being inspired by it or inspiration from it, because it's not. I mean, I suppose the only thing, because I picked up on this, outside of the meritocracy that was going on, but there was no internal conflict really between the humans, like outside of
I was thinking that
outside of Goldblum punching the president at some point in the past before he was president.
Judging the high school nerd, the rape victim. Like that's really the only what passes for internal conflict here. It's like a high school conception of what being an adult is going to be like.
Yeah, but otherwise it's...
Look at the nerds!
But otherwise you put your hand out and there's somebody there to grasp it. But you putting your hand out is not you needing help. You putting your hand out is out there to help somebody else. So you're proactive. This is a movie about being proactively helping somebody and getting that help. Because we haven't talked about the women yet, but Will Smith's fiance, what was her name?
It was played by Vivica A. Fox.
Jasmine Dubrow.
Jasmine Dubrow.
She goes around, saving people who've been, who survived the blast. I don't know how they survived the blast, because it was except for some cuts and bruises or internal bleeding. But, there was nobody out there trying to, normally you see and this, I guess I like this part, you see in a post-apocalypse scene, it's usually somebody trying to rob the other person or get gas or whatever, and so that is inspirational. That is great to see on screen, and this and the humanity coming together easily. Yeah, but it just outside of that, I don't know what else it would be, because
it's also sort of a role. It's also sort of a conventional role for a woman.
Yeah, no, the helper.
This movie is not brave enough to show men being helpers. It shows men clearly as warriors. Now let's look at the 3 women in this movie who have names. There's
oh God.
I mean, it's true. There's only 3 women.
Right.
Let's start with her, right? So there's this bit of I like the one exchange she has with the first lady where she says, I'm a dancer. Yeah. And the first lady immediately says, "Oh, ballet, jazz, what kind?" And she says, "No, exotic." And there's a moment of pause, and the first lady says, "Oh, I'm sorry." And to her credit, I guess this is kind of like a big deal on the big screen. Vivica A. Fox responsible. Don't be. I'm not. Yeah. I made this choice. The money's good, and I'm proud enough of my son. He's worth it, right? In order, the implication being to support her son. You've got the first lady, who I guess, sort of qualifies as a character. She's very underdeveloped. Her role seems to be to die.
Oh, yeah.
To inspire the president, right? So you get Vivica A. Fox, the helper, the nurturing mother, helper / love object to motivate Will Smith. You've got the first lady who dies. Her entire role is to motivate the president to be protected / whatever. That's what the women are doing here. And then the third one is the White House communications director, who is played by Margaret Colin, a character named Constance Spano. What a name, Constance Spano, and she is
interesting.
She is Jeff Goldblum's ex, who again serves as this sort of like, she doesn't have much to do. She's always just kind of wandering in and out of rooms. You don't see her ever acting in much of an official capacity. She's really there to
she's there to keep the
sort of serve as a reminder of what Jeff Goldblum doesn't get when he's a beta male, but what he can win when he stands up and starts acting like a man.
Yeah,
these are the three women, right?
Yeah.
So they're there to basically be protected / motivate our male characters. They're very thinly drawn.
Yeah. It's
and they're all in these sort of like traditional like storytelling capacities, right? Tropes, I would call them cliches if I'm feeling less charitable.
Yeah, exactly. Vivica A. Fox is ultimately rescued by Will Smith, even though she's a rescuer at the beginning. The first lady, is there to die, to give the president motivation, to kind of like reinforce his need to destroy these aliens. And then the communications director, she's there to kind of show, to lead the way of what it means to be a man. Because at the beginning, she tells the president, she's like, it was better when you stuck to your guns, but now with all this
when you were a pilot.
No, it was that, but it's like it was great when you stuck to your guns, but now with all this compromise, you're sliding in the polls, and it was like all this compromise.
She's there to question men's masculinity and tell them she likes them better when they're really alpha.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff Goldblum, he needs to be motivated. He's like, you could have done anything, and he's like, didn't you ever want to be a part of something? He's like, I am a part of something. He's like I'm part of humanity or something like that. It was like,
what?
Yeah. And then he decides to go.
You make me sick.
And yeah. Then when he's going up into space, she's like, now he decides to be ambitious. Like
yeah, right.
What is that? Like, what wild takes on these characters?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This film is so wild in a lot of ways. Like, I see the entertainment value in liking it when you were younger, because I mean, I have to admit I was entertained through the whole thing, but a lot of it was thinking about like, what's that alien civilization like? That seems really unrealistic to me, and
right,
and how would the Macintosh interact with that kind of stuff? That was the interesting part to me, but as a whole, I was not, super entertained by this. I remember enjoying it when I was younger. I do remember that, but I also, as I was watching this, there was whole scenes that I completely forgot about. I had not seen this in a long time, stuff that I did not remember at all.
The pacing on this movie is very, very slow. It's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah,
and there are whole minutes at a time where either all you're getting are sort of explosions, but more than that, there are whole minutes at a time where you're just getting, like, especially in just people cheering, just scenes of people cheering and applauding and clapping. You feel like you're kind of watching like a 4th of July parade. But I also kept thinking about this movie as a morality play, like this, medieval times when people were illiterate, when they couldn't read the Bible for themselves. The church would put on these things called morality plays, and they were meant to instruct people, not like less entertain, but more instruct people on how to be good, virtuous Christians. And I kept thinking that that's basically the template for this movie, except here, what is good and bad? Good is a virtuous American male. He's a fighter. He says words like, they don't even say the words democracy in here, right? Again, they're poo-pooing compromise. It's the American who, quote, sticks to his guns, and even better if they're real guns, right? Like that's what good is, and the whole world is just waiting for an excuse to get behind us. If we could just clear the clutter away, everybody would just get behind us. And the bad side, I guess, is anyone who is anything less than enthusiastic about the military, about career advancement, about, these very narrow categories of what a real man looks like in America, right? Like that's the thing, right? Other than that, it's very two-dimensional. The aliens, this movie shows no real curiosity in developing any kind of nuance. We get that thing about them being locusts, which, I guess that's kind of an interesting idea. It could be a moment where you could open up some conversation about like conservation or environmentalism. Like, it seems like there's like a kernel of an idea there, but that never gets opened up, and you apart from that get nothing except some kind of facial expressions to tell you who these aliens are. Like they take over Brent Spiner's body to talk to us, and the only message they have for us is, like the president says, "What do you want us to do? Die! Die!" That's all the aliens have to say to us. It's very, very two-dimensional, as you say.
These intergalactic species who can build amazing 15-mile wide spaceships with force fields and coordinate, battles. Have no emotional intelligence.
Transmit power wirelessly, right?
Wirelessly.
At this point, why are we not just pulling energy out of a sun or out of some planet where, like, it's very confusing, and it does not hold up to any kind of depth. Maybe that's the hostility they have toward Jeff Goldblum. He's the kind of guy who would see this movie and ask the questions we're asking, and it's a preemptive shot across the bow.
The thing is, like,
those folks.
These aliens were pretty much like, I don't know, the same way like zombies, could like represent, commercialism and like greed and like this walking through life with your head in the sand type of deal. Aliens have that same ability, and these aliens were, I originally thought that it was like, imperialism, colonialism, but they have no interest in ruling. They're just looking, these aliens are representing capitalism to the fullest, where their whole idea is to expand, to just keep expanding, suck every resource out of that, and then move on to the next one. I mean, that's what we live in right now. The system we live in right now. Once it's
true.
the only time like a successful, like a business is successful, a public business, is if it's going up in stock and expanding, and it keeps absorbing stuff and keeps grabbing stuff and
pump the well dry.
Yeah, exactly. Like it takes on if it runs out of physical resources, it does that with mental and spiritual resources, and now it's like putting a toehold in mindfulness for the last couple decades. But it's that's exactly what these aliens are. They're capitalism to the fullest. Except I don't think these characters see that, and I'm sure the people watching it don't see that. Where like what is wrong with these characters? They're just they say die. They're animals. They are locusts. They have there's no humanity to them. As much as we can expand the idea of humanity to like other species, which also seems problematic at times because it's like us placing our values on someone else's, like some other culture, like that's beyond us. But it's this idea of like reducing these creatures to the smallest, most inhuman thing that we can in order to kill them easily, and then also to make sure we don't recognize them in our own lives, in our own systems. Like we don't they don't make sense in the traditional expansion empire, because normally they go after resources, but they're also going after workforces and humans and culture, and we're looking to absorb just spread ourselves over. And these aliens don't care. They just cut to the chase. We just want your resources, and we've got the power to do it. And I'm pretty sure if Americans had that power, we probably would do that. We would probably what, our planes are 50 times better than everything you've got over there, and we could take on the world. We're just going to go ahead and destroy Iraq and take over the oil fields, whatever.
You could make a real argument that we've done it. But I think that's a profound insight. It does take a special kind of obtuseness to make a movie like this. America is many things. The United States of America is many things. Not all of them bad, but two of its most prominent attributes are its militarism. It's sort of over-the-top militarism, obsession with violence, and its devotion to capitalism, rapacious capitalism, at all costs. And in this movie, they're pitting these two qualities against each other, but they don't even. They're sort of so high on their own supply of the myth of what America is. Yeah. Right. That they don't even recognize this sort of contradiction that they've set up. Right. A thorough reading of what you just laid out would the conclusion would be that the only way to defeat the destructiveness of capitalism is to submit fully to our militarism, to become basically a fascist state where your only value is the service you can offer to the military. If you're reading this on a really deep level, that's a very disturbing implication, right? The argument here is the only worthy man, the only question is that JFK quote taken to its most extreme. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Otherwise, get off my freaking lawn, right? You're a waste. You're a beggar.
Well, these aliens, if you think about it, Alex, you've mentioned that coupling, I guess, that capitalism, militarism. This is what the aliens are. I mean, they're capitalists. They're looking for resources, but what are they 100% being represented as? That's just the military. There was no diplomacy. There's no there's no miners. There's just people coming to annihilate everything.
Soldier capitalists, right? Soldier extractionists.
These aliens are, in some ways, the American dream, or an aspect of the American dream. It's like looking in the mirror. If you wanted to make a perfect sequel, I read the synopsis on the sequel again, and they have a whole world and all that bullshit. But if you wanted to make a perfect sequel, you would have us humans reverse engineering all of this space stuff and then slowly turning into these aliens and going back in time to reclaim our own resources because we ran out of resources.
Was that really the sequel? That's the sequel?
No, that would be the ideal sequel. What they have right now is just they have a home world where there's more of these idiots. They're like a hive mind
we've met.
So
we've met the enemy and they are us.
Exactly.
It's us 1,000 years down the line. This is where we're headed, but again, these guys, there's no internal dialogue in most of these men. They don't see that. All they see is we beat the enemy. Well, Phil, as we come to the end of the discussion on this, I'm just going to bring it up. It's a segment we do often on this show. What did Roger Ebert say?
Yeah, what did he say?
Roger Ebert, back in 1986, I looked it up because I was curious, and he actually, he didn't go into quite the depth on all the points we make, but he does talk a lot about the two-dimensionality of these characters, the way that they are basically archetypes. But I'm going to read his summary here in this recurring segment of ours that we often do at the end of an episode. I think this sums up his stance on the movie. He says, Independence Day is in the tradition of silly summer fun, and on that level, I kind of liked it. It's about the closest we've ever come to agreeing.
Yeah,
I think with Roger Ebert's review of a movie, he's talking about kind of the weakness of the special effects, which is interesting given the fact that this was a movie lauded for its special effects. But in general, he's kind of just he's loath. He puts the movie down a lot for kind of the clunky little characterization of these characters, right? Of the kind of the weak two-dimensionality of this, the puppet show morality play that you and I have been talking about. So I guess, Phil, this does mark kind of a historic episode for us here on Top of the Morning. It's the first time, to our knowledge, that we've basically agreed with Roger Ebert on something.
Yeah.
Phil, what is the prize?
Let today be known as an Independence Day for not just Roger Ebert, for all film critics.
An independence from disagreeing with other film critics.
We have seen The Enemy, and he is Roger Ebert, and he is us. It's... yeah.
It's all a rich tapestry.
Uh-huh.
Well, geez Louise. Phil, if people enjoyed this show more than we enjoyed Independence Day, how can they support Pop of the Morning?
They can go over to cosmicblair.com and find all the information there, but the best thing they can do is click on Patreon. We have a Become a Patron button. Click that and go to patreon.com/Cosmic Blair. And for as low as $1 a month, you can support this podcast. And every little bit helps. We've got a couple goals we're trying to reach, so we can work on this full time. But yeah, everything is helpful. So yeah, go to patreon.com/Cosmic Blair.
That's right. Again, these small amounts, they do help. But if you are in a situation where you don't have the money to spare, we totally understand that. We've been there too. One of the best things you can do for us, whether you're offering your support on Patreon or not, is to share this show with someone who you think might like it. Word of mouth is the way that creative works gain traction, the way that they get out there in the world, the way that they thrive and grow. So please, if you have a friend who likes Independence Day, who likes 80s, 90s, aughts pop culture, who you feel might get something out of this show, please tell them about it. Please share a link. Please talk to them about it. We really do appreciate that. Phil, what is next for Pop of the Morning?
Well, this is interesting. We're taking a 2-month break, so our next show won't be until August 22nd. But the next episode that we will be, or the next TV show, we'll be looking at a TV show. We'll be looking at Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So we're following Will Smith back in time to his beginnings.
With Will Smith.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Alrighty. Well, but I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So, but again, we'll be taking a break after this episode, and won't be back until August 22nd, 22.
And during that downtime, we'd just like to remind you that there are more than 60 episodes currently in the archive, in the archive of Pop of the Morning. We've got a whole first season of this show in case you missed that. It's a great time to go back and look at some of the stuff we were talking about back then. We do the treatment all across the 80s, the 90s, and the aughts. Some of your favorite movies, some of your least favorite movies. It's a big, honking piece of nostalgia pie. And I encourage you, take yourself a big slice and then go back for seconds. There's plenty to go around. So check out the archive in the time we're off. Until that time, hope you guys have a great summer, and we'll see you in the fall.
Yeah.
I remain Tom.
And I'm Phil. And Pop of the Morning to all of you.
And to all of us, a good Pop of the Morning.
Right up that alien butthole.